You're too problematic to keep in one place. Pack your things by Friday. She said it while examining her fingernails, not looking at me, not even pretending this was a real conversation. Just words tossed into the space between us, like someone commenting on weather. Her name was Solène, the CEO's daughter, and she was 24 years old. I was 37. I'd been working quality inspection for 9 years. She'd been out of graduate school for 6 months. This was location 3. The third time in 4 months, someone had boxed up my toolkit and sent me somewhere new. But this was the first time she'd spoken directly to me. Before this, transfers came through email. Impersonal, clinical. One line saying, report to a different address Monday morning. Now she stood in the supervisor's office like she owned it, which technically her family did, telling me I was problematic. I wanted to ask what that meant, what I'd done, what rule I'd broken. But something in the way she wouldn't look at me made the question die in my throat, because I realized she didn't care about the answer. This wasn't punishment for something specific. This was just what she did. Any questions? She asked, still studying her nails. I had 1,000. I said nothing. She smiled then. Small, quick, like she'd won something. Good. Human resources will send your paperwork. That moment broke something inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack, like ice on a windshield, that spiders out slowly until the whole thing shatters. And in that crack, something else grew, something patient, something that understood this wasn't going to stop at location 3. Before we go further into what happened next, I want to thank you for being here. Stories like mine don't get heard often, because people like Solène count on us staying quiet, staying scattered, staying too afraid to speak. But you're listening. That matters more than you know. If this story means something to you, hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me if you've ever felt invisible at your job. And subscribe, because what comes next is going to show you exactly what happens when someone underestimates the problematic woman they keep moving around. My name is Renata, not the kind of name people forget, but somehow I became forgettable anyway. I'm the person who checks if your workplace is trying to hurt you. That's what quality inspection means in simple terms. I walk through warehouses and production facilities, looking for things that might injure workers, or worse, broken equipment, missing safety gear, ventilation systems that stopped working months ago but nobody noticed because the damage happens too slowly to see. I grew up in a manufacturing town where my father lost 3 fingers to a machine that should have had a safety guard. Company said he was careless, paid him $2,000 and fired him a week later. I was 11. I watched him try to find work with 7 fingers and a reputation for being careless. Nobody would hire him. We lost the house. My mother started working 2 jobs. My father started drinking. So when people ask why I do this work, why I care about ventilation fans and fire suppression systems, and the thickness of protective gloves, I show them a photo of my father's hand. That's why. That's always why. At location 1, I thought the transfers were normal. New employee, learning different sites, building experience. Location 2 made me wonder. Location 3 made me understand. I wasn't being trained. I was being used. But let me take you back further, to the day I got hired. The interview happened at the main administrative building, the only place I ever saw that looked like the family cared about appearances. Everything else was industrial, functional, profit-driven. But that building had art on walls and plants in lobbies and people who smiled like they meant it. The man who hired me was named Corbett. He ran operations for all 19 production sites. Gray hair, tired eyes. The kind of person who'd been doing this work so long, he'd stopped seeing the problems right in front of him. We need someone with integrity, he told me. Someone who'll report what they actually see, not what makes management comfortable. I believed him. That was my first mistake. Location 1 was a packaging facility. Small operation, maybe 40 workers per shift. My job was simple. Walk through twice daily, check equipment logs, verify safety protocols were being followed. If something looked wrong, document it, and report to the site supervisor. On my 3rd day, I found a hydraulic press with a cracked seal. The fluid was leaking onto the floor. Workers had put cardboard down to absorb it, which meant they'd known about the problem for days, maybe weeks. I wrote it up, submitted the report. The site supervisor thanked me and said maintenance would handle it. 2 days later, I got transferred to location 2. No explanation, just an email saying, report to a new site Monday morning, different address, same job title. I thought maybe that was protocol. Maybe inspectors rotated regularly to prevent them from getting too comfortable with workers, too willing to overlook small violations. Location 2 was a chemical processing plant. Bigger operation, 70 workers, 3 shifts. I noticed immediately the ventilation wasn't strong enough for the solvents they were using. You could smell it the moment you walked in, that sharp, bitter scent that makes your eyes water and your lungs burn. The workers wore respirators, but respirators only filter particles, not vapors. The vapors needed to be extracted at the source. I documented everything, submitted my report, got transferred 6 weeks later. Location 3 was where Selene first spoke to me, where she called me problematic, where I started to understand the pattern wasn't random. But what I didn't understand yet was why. Why move me constantly? Why call me problematic when I was doing exactly what Corbett had hired me to do? Why smile that small, victorious smile when I didn't ask questions? The answer came slowly, piece by piece, transfer by transfer. Location 4 had a ventilation fan that hadn't been serviced in 8 months. I know because the maintenance log sat on a clipboard near the entrance, and every week someone signed it claiming they'd inspected the fan. But the fan had a broken blade. You could see it if you looked up. One blade snapped clean off, the others spinning unevenly, the whole system vibrating like it might tear itself apart any second. I climbed a ladder to check it myself. The motor housing was hot enough to burn skin. The belt was fraying. The whole assembly was maybe a month away from catastrophic failure. And catastrophic failure in a facility that processed metal dust meant fire. Metal dust is explosive in the right concentration. Everyone who works with it knows this. The ventilation system is the only thing keeping that dust from reaching explosive levels. I took photos, documented the broken blade, the frayed belt, the heat signature. I wrote down the names of every worker on that floor, their shift schedules, and in my own journal that night, I added something else. How many of them had children? Why did I write that? Because I needed to remember these weren't just safety violations. They were children who might lose a parent. That's what negligence actually means when you strip away the legal language. I submitted my report. 6 weeks later, I transferred to Location 5. But before I left Location 4, something happened. Selene visited. She didn't usually come to the sites while I was there. I'd learn later. But this time she did. She walked through the facility with the site supervisor, nodding, pointing. She spent 11 minutes on the production floor, where that broken ventilation fan was screaming its mechanical death rattle. 3 days after I transferred out, Location 4 got a new ventilation system. Complete replacement. The site supervisor sent a message to all staff, celebrating the upgrade. He called it a proactive investment in worker safety. I saw that message because I was still on the Location 4 email list. They'd forgotten to remove me, and that's when the pattern clicked into focus. She wasn't moving me randomly. She was using me as her personal inspector. Move me in. Let me find the problems that might get the family sued. Move me out before I could connect with workers. Then fix the problems and take credit for caring about safety. The workers at Location 4 never knew how close they'd come to an explosion. They never knew the fan had been broken for months, while maintenance logs claimed otherwise. They just saw the CEO's daughter showing up, identifying a problem, and fixing it. They probably thought she was competent, maybe even kind, and I was already gone, so nobody could ask me what I'd seen before she arrived. Location 5 taught me about chemical exposure. Location 6 taught me about inadequate fire exits. Location 7 taught me that workers started calling me the ghost because I kept disappearing. Location 8 taught me that Solene's pattern was deliberate, calculated, and completely protected by her father's ownership. By Location 9, I'd stopped trying to make friends. What was the point? I'd be gone in 6 weeks. The other workers treated me like I was contagious, like whatever made me transfer constantly might spread to them if they got too close. So they kept their distance. They were polite but not warm, professional but not personal. It was the loneliness that hurt most, not the transfers themselves, but the isolation they created. Humans aren't built to be temporary everywhere they go. We need roots. We need people who know our stories. We need someone to remember we exist. I had none of that. Location 9 was where I saw the fire suppression system had been disabled, not broken, deliberately turned off. There was a valve that should have been open, and it was closed, and someone had put a lock on it. I asked the site supervisor about it. He looked uncomfortable. Cost savings, he said. We're being more efficient with resource allocation. That's corporate language for, we decided your life isn't worth the monthly inspection fee. I wrote it all down, not just in my official reports, which Solène would see, but in my personal journal, a small notebook I kept in my bag. Every night after work, I'd sit in whatever temporary housing I was staying at and write, not just safety violations, everything. The profit numbers I'd glimpse on supervisors' computers, the production schedules, which sites made the most money, which violations would cost the most to fix. I wasn't planning anything yet, I was just documenting. But documentation is its own kind of power when you're patient enough to let it accumulate. Location 10 was forgettable. Location 11 had the same solvent vapor problem as Location 2. Location 12 had equipment so old the manufacturer didn't make replacement parts anymore. Workers were fabricating their own parts from scrap metal, and those makeshift parts were failing in ways that could trap limbs. By Location 13, something shifted in me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was rage that had been building for 10 transfers. Maybe it was the counterfeit breathing masks. The masks looked legitimate. Right packaging, right logos, right model numbers. But the material was wrong. I noticed because I'd handled hundreds of these masks across previous locations. These felt different, lighter. I cut one open that night in my temporary room. The filter material dissolved when I exposed it to the same chemicals workers were breathing through them all day. 3 workers at Location 13 developed respiratory problems that month. Coughing fits that wouldn't stop. Burning sensations in their lungs. One woman named Dree was 28 years old with a 6-month-old baby. She had to leave her shift early twice that week because she couldn't breathe properly. The site supervisor told her to take some days off, rest up, probably just a cold. It wasn't a cold. It was chemical exposure that her counterfeit mask had failed to filter. Solène transferred me the next day. Didn't even wait the full 6 weeks. Just called me into the supervisor's office and said, "We need fresh perspectives at other sites." That phrase, fresh perspectives, like I was voluntarily rotating for career development instead of being moved to hide what I'd found. Before I left Location 13, I did something I hadn't done before. I talked to Dree, not about the masks directly. That would have been dangerous for both of us, but about her baby, her bills, what she'd do if she couldn't work anymore, what scared her most about this job. She told me she couldn't afford to lose this position. She was a single mother. This job paid better than anything else she qualified for. Even when my lungs hurt, she said, "I can't complain. They'll just replace me. At least here I know what I'm dealing with." "What if you weren't alone?" I asked. "What if it wasn't just you complaining?" She looked at me like I'd suggested something impossible. "Nobody organizes here. The CEO's family owns everything. You speak up, you're gone." I wrote down everything she said that night, and I wrote down something else. What she'd need to feel safe enough to speak up. What would have to change? What kind of evidence would make her believe action was possible? I started doing that at every location after 13. Not organizing, not recruiting, just listening. Learning what workers needed to feel powerful instead of disposable. Location 14, 15, 16. The transfers kept coming. 6 weeks each. New faces, new violations, same pattern. Solène would visit after I left, fix the most obvious problems, take credit for caring. But I was learning something she didn't know I was learning. I was mapping her entire operation, every site, every vulnerability, every way she was cutting corners to maximize profit while maintaining just enough safety to avoid obvious criminal liability. Location 16 was where I started making copies, not of my official reports, those belonged to the company, but my personal journal. Every night I'd photograph each page and upload it to 3 different cloud storage accounts, because I realized if something happened to me, if I got fired or worse, I needed this information to survive. Location 17 had outdated electrical systems. Location 18 had the faulty wiring in chemical storage that would eventually kill a man. I saw it on my second day at Location 18. Exposed wiring near flammable solvents. The insulation had deteriorated. One spark and the whole storage area would ignite. I documented it, submitted my report, got transferred that Friday, exactly on schedule. Solène authorized an electrician the following Monday, but installation takes time. Parts have to be ordered. Work has to be scheduled around production. She was trying to fix it, but she was too slow. The fire started Tuesday morning. A worker named Prentice was moving containers when a spark caught. He was 41 years old, 2 kids in middle school. The fire spread faster than anyone expected because the suppression system in that area was the same model as Location 9, the one that got disabled for cost savings. Prentice died from smoke inhalation before firefighters reached him. I learned about it from a news alert on my phone. I was already at Location 19 by then, unpacking my toolkit in another temporary room, preparing for another 6 weeks of documenting violations that would get fixed after I left. The news called it a tragic accident. Solène released a statement. Our hearts are with the family during this difficult time. We're cooperating fully with investigators to understand what happened and prevent future incidents. She attended the funeral. I know because workers at Location 18 posted photos. She wore black. She cried. She hugged Prentice's widow. 3 days later, she drove me to Location 19 herself. First time we'd been alone since Location 3. She didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Just drove, her hands tight on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched. Finally, she said, "This one's temporary, just until we sort out the investigation at 18. Keep your head down. Don't talk to anyone about procedures." "Why?" I asked. First question I'd asked her directly in 15 transfers. She glanced at me. Her eyes were hard. "Because I'm telling you to. That's not a reason. It's the only reason you need." She pulled into the parking area at Location 19. "You're good at your job, Renata. You find problems, but you need to understand something. Problems are only valuable when they're solved quietly. You start making noise, connecting things that don't need connecting, and you become a different kind of problem, the kind I can't move around anymore. Understand?" I understood perfectly. She was threatening me, not loudly, not dramatically, just making it clear that my usefulness had limits, and I was approaching them. "I understand," I said. She smiled. Same small smile from Location 3. "Good." Location 19 had industrial solvents without proper extraction hoods, vapor buildup, the kind that damages organs slowly, invisibly, until one day your liver stops processing toxins, and you collapse at work wondering what went wrong. I'd seen similar setups at Locations 5 and 11. I knew exactly what this would do to workers over time, and I knew exactly how long Solène would wait before fixing it. 6 weeks, maybe 8, if the investigation at Location 18 was taking up her attention. A worker at Location 19 named Tomas collapsed 3 weeks into my stay. He'd been there 2 years. 2 years breathing those vapors daily. He was 35 years old. His liver was failing. Doctors said he might need a transplant, might not survive long enough to get one. That's when federal investigators arrived. Not local inspectors, federal, because Prentice's death at Location 18 had triggered a deeper investigation. And when investigators start looking at one location, they start looking at patterns across all locations. They questioned everyone at Location 19. Most workers didn't know anything useful. They'd only seen their own site, their own shifts. They knew Tomas had collapsed, knew the facility had problems, but they didn't know how those problems connected to 18 other locations, with 18 other sets of violations. When investigators reached me, they asked standard questions first. How long had I worked there? What did I do? Had I noticed anything unusual? Then one investigator, a woman named Una, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many dead workers, asked a different question. "You've been transferred 18 times in 2 years. That's unusual. Have you noticed any patterns across multiple locations?" I looked at her for a long moment. This was the choice. Stay quiet, stay employed, stay invisible, or hand over everything and watch what happened next. I reached into my bag, pulled out my journal. 400 pages, 18 locations, every safety violation, every delayed repair, every injured worker, every conversation with workers about their fears and their children and their bills. "This might help," I said. Una took the journal, started reading. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her grip tighten. She flipped to page 47, went completely still. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "Names and contact information. Every worker I met across 18 locations, organized by which site produces the most profit for the company. Cross-referenced with which violations hurt those workers the most." She looked up at me. "Why did you organize it this way?" "Because problems are only valuable when they're solved," I said. She taught me that. Una didn't ask who she was. She knew. But here's what the investigators didn't know. Here's what Solen didn't know. Here's what changed everything. I didn't give the journal to investigators first. 3 days before Una and her team arrived at location 19, I'd already given copies to the workers. Not all 500, just specific ones. The ones I'd listened to at locations 4, 7, 9, 13, 16, and 18. The ones who'd told me about their children, their bills, their fear of speaking up alone. I'd sent them each a package. Physical mail, not digital. Inside was a copy of my journal sections, relevant to their location, and a single page of instructions. The instructions said, on Tuesday morning, don't go to work, don't call in sick, don't give a reason, just don't show up. Tell 3 other workers you trust to do the same. Tell them to tell 3 more. Do this Monday night, not before. All of you, same day, same time. Tuesday morning, workers at locations 4, 7, 9, 13, 16, and 18 didn't show up for their shifts. Not all of them, but enough. 30 to 40% at each site. The 6 most profitable locations in the entire operation. They didn't strike. Strikes can be broken. Strikes require organization that can be targeted, leaders who can be fired, demands that can be negotiated away. They just stopped coming. No explanation. No demands. Just absence. Solen couldn't fire them all. That would be obvious retaliation, right after Prentice's death, right during a federal investigation. She couldn't hire replacements fast enough because these were skilled positions requiring weeks of training. She couldn't threaten them because they weren't asking for anything. How do you threaten someone who won't even tell you what they want? Production stopped. Contracts got canceled. Revenue disappeared. Her father, the CEO, started losing millions daily. By the time Una read page 47, the damage was already happening. The journal became evidence in the criminal investigation. But the real revenge wasn't legal. It was economic. It was teaching 500 workers across 18 locations that they had more power than Solen did if they moved together. The daughter and her father got arrested for criminal negligence, multiple counts, Prentice's death, Tomas's liver failure, dozens of other injuries that my journal documented in detail with dates, conditions, and proof that they'd known about violations and delayed fixes to save money. But by then, the business was already dying. Not from fines, not from legal fees, from workers who finally understood they didn't have to accept being disposable. Within 4 weeks, locations 4, 7, 9, 13, 16, and 18 shut down permanently. The remaining locations couldn't generate enough profit to keep the operation running. The CEO declared bankruptcy. Workers who'd walked out got jobs at competitors within weeks because companies desperate to hire people who understood safety protocols and had just demonstrated they wouldn't tolerate negligence. The workers who'd been injured, including Dree with her damaged lungs, and Tomas waiting for a liver transplant, got settlements from the insurance company during bankruptcy proceedings. Not enough to undo the harm, but enough to survive while their bodies tried to heal. Solen wrote me one letter from her cell, just one line. You planned this, from location 3. She was wrong. I planned it from location 1. The moment Corbett hired me and told me they needed someone with integrity, I knew that was a lie. Nobody who wants integrity moves their inspector every 6 weeks. But I took the job anyway because I wanted to see the whole operation. I wanted to map every site, every violation, every way they were hurting workers to increase profit. I didn't know it would take 18 locations. I didn't know someone would die. But I knew eventually there would be enough documentation, enough workers who understood their power, enough evidence that even a CEO's daughter couldn't hide behind her family's money. The journal became evidence in criminal trials that sent Solen to prison for 3 years and her father for 12. But that wasn't the revenge. Prison is what the legal system did. The revenge was what the workers did. They didn't need investigators. They didn't need lawyers. They didn't need justice from people in authority who might or might not care about dead workers in industrial facilities. They just needed to understand they could stop working for someone who treated their lives as acceptable losses. Page 47 didn't convict Solen. It armed the workers. It showed them they weren't alone. Their injuries weren't isolated incidents. And the problems they thought were just bad luck at their specific site were actually systematic negligence across 18 locations. That's the revenge. Not destroying one person legally, but teaching 500 people they had power all along. I still work in quality inspection. Same industry, different company. But now, when I walk into a location, workers recognize my face. They've heard the story. They ask questions. They take notes. They know their rights. They know what violations look like. They know they don't have to wait for someone to save them. Last month, I walked into a new site for my first inspection. A worker approached me during lunch break. Young guy, maybe 26. He said, "You're Renata. You're the one who brought down the CEO with a notebook." "I didn't bring anyone down," I told him. "Workers brought them down. I just gave them information they deserved to have." He smiled. "Yeah, that's what I heard. That's why I wanted to meet you. We've been organizing here, learning from what happened at those 18 locations, making sure management knows we're paying attention. That's the part that would destroy Solène if she knew. Not that she's in prison, not that her family's business is gone, but that workers learned something from what she did to me. They learned they're not powerless. And that lesson is spreading to facilities she never touched, workers she never hurt, locations that have nothing to do with her. Her legacy isn't the business her family built. It's the movement she accidentally created by underestimating a problematic woman with a notebook. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story affected you, if you've ever felt disposable at your job or wondered if speaking up would matter, I need you to do something. Like this video so more people find it. Comment below with one word describing how this made you feel. And subscribe because stories like mine need to be told. And workers like you need to know you're not alone. Every single one of those actions helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it. Someone who feels problematic. Someone who's been moved around or silenced or treated like they don't matter. You matter. Your safety matters. And you have more power than anyone who's hurting you wants you to know.